Hello and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, the general topic podcast that takes a topic each week and, as the name suggests, casts views. This week's guest is the one and only Satsu from Chatsunami. Hello again.
Hey there, glad to be back.
I've dragged you on, and you just told me beforehand that you picked up a cold or something, and I've dragged you on here to do a recording.
I apologise in advance to all the lovely listeners out there who are listening to my fluey tones, I suppose is the right word, or term rather. Yeah.
No, cheers for coming on again. Had you on a few weeks ago, didn't we? We did the band advertising.
Oh yeah, that was a good episode, to be fair.
And again, kind of got you on for another TV-related episode. But before we get stuck into all that, how are you and how is Chatsunami podcast going? And yeah, tell us a little bit about what you've got going on as we speak.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, my name's Satsunami, and of course I'm the host of the Chatsunami podcast, a variety podcast that deals with topics such as gaming, film, TV shows, as well as you and I are going to discuss today, of course, and really all good general interests. Recently, we just wrapped up a themed month, and of course, we were focusing on The Simpsons last month. So it was interesting, I have to say. It was interesting doing one final month before we wrap up for season 4. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what season 4 has in store for us. And probably a good couple of months. So yeah, that'll be fun.
I look forward to it because, one, I've said before, I'm a big fan of your podcast. Two, your podcast is really going from strength to strength, isn't it, at the moment? It's great to see.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we just reached the 20,000 mark, which feels a bit surreal, to be honest.
It's
I don't know what.
unbelievable. Well, unbelievable in the sense of the number, but fully deserved. I mean,
Well, thank you.
your Simpsons month that just finished recently. I was going to ask, so it feels like there was I'm not sure if the poll was rigged on that final one to get groundskeeper Willie, with your Scottish connection. I don't know. I don't want to say the poll was rigged, but.
See, I put that in as a joke answer because for anyone who doesn't know, I had a poll up and it had, I think it was Homer, Ned, Mr. Burns, and Groundskeeper Willie. And I thought, obviously, because Groundskeeper Willie is the quintessential Scottish Simpsons character, I thought, you know what, let's just put him in. Let's see if anybody says, yeah, sure, let's talk about Groundskeeper Willie for an hour. And yeah, my co-host wasn't very happy when he was like, we could have been talking about Ned Flanders, Homer, Mr. Burns, but no, you just had to put in Groundskeeper Willie. And I was like, I'm sorry.
It was a good episode. Joking aside, I think Groundskeeper Willie is probably I'll be honest, I've not watched a lot of the recent seasons of The Simpsons, but he's that quirky, different character, isn't it? So there's probably an interest on having a bit of a focus on him, probably rather than some of the other ones in the poll. I can see the appeal of having voted for him, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely one of these characters. Like when you're looking at your favourite TV show and you see, the main ensemble, and then there's always that one background character that you know of, but you think, oh, right, they're kind of just there. But the more and more you look into them, you're like, they actually have a semi-interesting past. So, yeah, it was interesting to see what we uncovered, like the good, the bad, and the Willie, as they say.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, look, as any good TV show or TV-based podcast will have, let's have a quick commercial break. We're going to hear from Super Familiar with the Wilsons.
The Super Familiar with the Wilsons podcast. You know that family whose house you hung out in when you were a kid? The house was a little loud and chaotic, but always fun, and sometimes felt more home than home. Well, that's us.
We're the Wilsons, and we welcome you into our podcast with silly chat, ridiculous games, and interviews with interesting people.
Like a spin doctor. The Super Familiar with the Wilsons podcast.
Welcome home.
And we are back. And I just want to say, actually, while we're talking about Super Familiar with the Wilsons, just want to shout out, say thanks to them again, because the music you hear every week at the start and end of the end of the show is provided by Josh. So thank you again, Josh, for doing that. Right, got you on for a TV-based one. And it's funny for a couple of reasons, because couple of recent episodes of mine, so the one that will have released a couple of weeks ago is a TV. I did one with a friend of mine on TV finales. I'm currently working on a secret, not so secret because I've said it now, but mini-series that has got a TV theme around it. But today we are talking about Jumping the Shark. And you've made me do this quicker because it was funny, because I had it on my idea board, and then what was it? It was a few weeks ago. You did a random tweet about it, and I can't remember what it was or what made you do that. Can you remember?
I think it was just one of these random ones I was thinking about, and this is, if anybody's seen my Twitter, you'll know it's just a bunch of random questions that pop up and things like that. Like, if your podcast was this, what would it be? You know, things like that. And I remember just thinking about Jump the Shark, because I don't know if I must have been watching a video or someone brought it up in conversation, and I was like, you know what, that's a really interesting question. What, yeah, like, I wonder what everybody thinks about this. And then, of course, 2 seconds later, of me posting that, you were in my DMs being like, oh, we need to do an episode on this. And I was like, absolutely, yes. Why not?
I responded to your tweet, then I remember messaging you saying, look, great question. I've got a topic on this. I want to do it now. How about you come on? Because, you know, you tweeted it. Perfect for you to be on on this particular episode then. So, yeah, here we are, Jumping the Shark. Now, it's a phrase that is absolutely synonymous in pop culture now. I knew where it was from anyway. Were you aware of the origin of the term?
Yeah, it's quite a weird origin, I have to say. And I can see why it's synonymous with, you know, what it came from. It was Happy Days, wasn't it? With the Fonz jumping over a literal shark.
Jumping over a shark.
Yeah, literally. And you know the way it's like, it's one of those phrases you don't really think about. You kind of say it and think, oh, right, jumping the shark. And then when you think about it, you think, hold on a minute, that is really weird. Where does that come from? And then you go back and you actually see that clip from Happy Days, and you're like, this is weird.
So you have seen the clip in question, yeah?
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, even for like TV back then, it is a weird choice.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because, yeah, some phrases are twisted, or you look behind it and there's some metaphorical meaning. But no, he did water ski jump over a shark.
That was a shark.
Yeah, so I kind of, just here, I've got it for anyone who isn't aware. So, as we said, the term jumping the shark is used to argue that a creative work or outlet appears to have reached a point where it has exhausted its core ideas and is introducing new creative ideas that are discordant with its core nature. The phrase was coined in 1985 in response to a 1977 episode of the American sitcom Happy Days, in which Fonzie, Henry Winkler, jumps over a shark while on water skis. Now, what I've then also found, I was just digging around about that. So Ron Howard, actually in an interview in 2006, did discuss a little bit about this. And he said, I remember Donnie Most and I sitting there looking at the script. Donnie was really upset. He said, oh man, look at what our show has devolved into. It's not very funny. And you know Fonzie's jumping over a shark. And I kept saying, hey Donnie, we're a hit show, relax. You know it's hard to have great episodes one after another. Fonzie jumping over a shark, it's going to be funny and great. I remember thinking that creatively this was not our greatest episode, but I thought it was a pretty good stunt and I understood why they wanted to do it. What I remember most is it was fun actually driving the speedboat, which I did do a bit of, noticing that Henry was actually a pretty good water skier. But the thing that has to be remembered about jumping the shark idea is that the show went on to be a massive success for years after that. So it's a fun expression, and I get a kick out of the fact that they identified that episode because, granted, maybe it was pushing things a bit too far. But I think a lot of good work was done after that show, and audience seemed to really respond to it. So the reason why I included that was because in my head, I'd always had, and when I was looking at some examples online, that jumping the shark was the moment that a show, as it said there, had used up all its best ideas and was the eventual downfall. But when you look at Happy Days, it wasn't. It was just people look at it and say, yeah, they've really got no other new idea and they've just done anything. So kind of, is that how you'd had it in your head, that it was either the eventual downfall of a show or just that it was just a bizarre out there idea that maybe the writers came in, had a blank bit of paper and had 5 minutes to submit an episode?
Yeah, to be honest, it does seem as if jumping the shark is like a last resort. Because usually, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of shows that I have heard of that they'll still continue even after the jumping the shark moment. You know, they'll introduce new characters. Because I mean, if you look at long-standing series like The Simpsons, for example, you have a lot of jumping the shark moments, both literally and figuratively, where Homer might become, I don't know, like a superstar in something, or is getting shot by a cannon in one episode, the whole town's getting moved. You know, like they get into wacky adventures, and you can understand kind of because that's a cartoon, that's more animated than some of the others, but that's never really stopped it from carrying on,
Yeah.
for better or for worse, you know. But there have been some, I have to say, that I've noticed that the jumping the shark has become pretty much on the one hand, some of the examples that I've got tonight are essentially the final nail in the coffin, despite being very popular to begin with. And then as soon as they hit that moment of jumping the shark, then they just absolutely plummet. Whereas there's some others that I know still technically finished, but they had spin-offs and things like that. So initially I thought it would be the death of a show, but it doesn't seem to be for like a fair few examples. So it's quite interesting to see that even if you jump the shark, it's not a death sentence.
Yeah, it is interesting what you said. And I think, yeah, for a lot of shows, it probably can go hand in hand and it would make sense why it doesn't. But maybe it might be a springboard for something new, a new direction. So I've got some examples of ones I actually remember. Then I did search the net for a bit. Now, I kind of chucked at you before today, or just just before recording that, open it up for films as well. Happy with it for films. But I've got two other things just quickly before I hand over to you for your first example of terms similar or of similar usage to jump the shark in TV and entertainment. So the first one, you might be able to guess when I say it, but one is nuke the fridge.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, I was in the cinema when I witnessed that.
So
So
in,
sorry,
no,
go
no,
on.
in 2008, Time identified a term modeled after Jump the Shark called nuke the fridge, specifically applicable to film. The magazine defined the term to exhaust the Hollywood franchise with disappointing sequels. The phrase derives from a scene in the fourth Indiana Jones film, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, in which Indiana Jones survives an atomic bomb detonation by fitting himself into a lead lined refrigerator to shield himself from the radiation. The explosion annihilates its surroundings but sends the refrigerator flying sufficiently distant for the protagonist to escape unhurt. The scene was criticized as being scientifically implausible. Possibly some examples of mine may or may not fit the nuke the fridge element. But there's one I'd never heard of before, and it's quite funny when you see the explanation. It's called growing the beard. Now, sci-fi fans may know this or not, but growing the beard refers to the opposite of jumping the shark, i.e., when a show dramatically improves in quality. In the series Star Trek The Next Generation, the second season is considered to be better in terms of storytelling over the first season. This shift coincides with character William Riker, who was clean shaven for the first season, growing a mustache and beard that he retained for the second season. Brilliant.
That's amazing. Yeah, I have to admit that is 100% true.
So I just found it funny that there were some other kind of sayings that have spawned out of specific things in TV. But tell you what, let's go first. Hit me with your first example of a jump the shark moment.
Well, going for a British example, and my second example is kind of linked to this as well because it had the same showrunner. But did you ever watch Sherlock by any
Oh, I
chance?
did, yes, yeah.
So The first two seasons, I think people could argue, although they were a wee bit far-fetched, they seemed to capture everyone's imagination. Everyone wanted to see the next episode, and slight spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, but by the end of the second season, they reenacted was it the Rhineback Falls or something like that? Like
Yes,
the
yeah.
same story from the novels, only with a more contemporary setting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they had to bring him back for a third season and all of that. And don't get me wrong, that wasn't necessarily the jump in the shark moment. It is one of them by all means, but there was one, in fact, there wasn't even one, there were several in particular with like season 3 and 4, where, again, spoilers, but when they revealed that I think it was John's fiance was like a super spy or
Yeah.
something, that Sherlock had a secret sister that was smarter than him and everything. It just kept getting more and more complicated. I think someone, quite brutally, mind you, but they described it as a silly person, and I'm using this very loosely and lightly, but they described it as a stupid person writing a smart character, and I can kind of see that throughout it. You know, the way he randomly says, "Oh, I knew you were an alcoholic based on the smell of your nails," or something like that. And it was like really obscure things that you could kind of see in season 1 and 2, but by season 3 and 4, it was like he was a magician. It was literally Doctor Strange by that point. And you're like, this is. It's not even jumped the shark, it's jumped off the building and bounced off the shark onto the next shark tank. It was. Yeah, it was a bit disappointing, to be fair.
I think you're right in that. I remember that show was kind of a breath of fresh air on TV, wasn't it? The first few series, anyway, it was gripping, it
Oh, yeah.
really well written, and you couldn't wait for the next episode. But I do remember the last season, and there was a whole thing, with his sister was his sister imprisoned? I can't remember.
Yeah, she
I've
was
not
like,
gone back to it, but I remember that whole episode felt really random and jumping to illogical conclusions.
yeah, because it was things like, oh, she had summoned Moriarty to that prison or something, and they thought Moriarty was alive and everything. I can't remember because, again, I haven't watched it since it aired on TV, but it was such a weird episode. I do agree. It was just all these contrivances and things like that. And it's such a shame because the show itself in the first two seasons was by all means great, but yeah, after that it just, yeah, as I said, jumped the building somewhere.
Do you think it was just a victim of its own high quality in that maybe even the writers? Because wasn't there rumours because the seasons got longer and longer apart because obviously, both the actors went on to do other things, didn't they? It felt like they were being dragged back to do Sherlock.
Yeah, because did both of them not go on to do The Hobbit? Because Benedict Cumberbatch did the motion capture, I remember, for Smog the Dragon in the films, and Martin Freeman did Bilbo Baggins in those films. I can't remember if they coincided with the filming of these in particular, because I remember there was the memes and references in between them, but it would explain why there was such like a gap in between them.
I just remember at the time as well, and this is all conjecture and media hype as well. But I think, if I remember right, I think there was also rumours that they just didn't, not necessarily that they didn't get on with each other, but they just didn't want to come back and do that show. That I think they'd had enough of it. And yeah, I can't remember if it was also coinciding with the Marvel stuff
Yeah.
because they're both in Marvel as well, right? But I just think the first couple of seasons were just so clever that do you write yourself into a corner?
Because I mean, jumping ahead on my list here, but I feel as if the showrunner, Stephen Moffat, who, don't get me wrong, he has done some excellent work, like in Doctor Who and, of course, in Sherlock, but it almost felt as if he was writing Sherlock a bit like a Doctor Who character, because in Doctor Who, you've got this alien who's very talented at getting himself out of a pickle, as it were. You know, he'll say, oh, you just reverse the polarity in this. Oh, you just press this button. Oh, that's great. Which is all fine and good for like a time traveler, alien kind of person. But, you know, when you've got a contemporary London setting and it's more grounded and realistic, it's like it doesn't fit the same. You know, if you want to make it fantastical, then make it
Yeah.
fantastical. Don't make it sci-fi,
Yeah.
which, yeah.
Great start. Great start. I am going to start with you're far too young to remember this, but I'm going to start with probably for me is the biggest of all jump the shark moments for my childhood or life and today. And I just also want to say that I'm not saying any of mine, and I think the same for you. I'm not saying any of these are bad shows. I'm just saying the moments we're picking,
Yeah.
or at least definitely that I'm picking, are just the WTF kind of thing that don't fit in with the
Yeah.
rest of the show. So, did you ever watch Dallas? I mean, I'm sure you're probably aware of Dallas, right?
Now, I haven't watched Dallas, but I know the exact moment you're talking about. And can I just say, I am actually wondering how many showers were sold
Yeah.
after that twist. Because, gee, I can imagine, like, as I said, like, I didn't really grow up watching it, but I can imagine how people must have felt.
Now, what I want to do is try quickly think on my feet and pick a different moment. But no, you've absolutely guessed it right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's the whole Bobby Ewing death and how he came back. So, for people that don't know, firstly, Dallas was just absolutely huge in the UK. Anyway, it was in the 80s, so it was one of those hugely over the top, glitzy, glamorous. The characters, oozing richness from America, and in the 80s, when this is just kind of straddling when we only had 3 channels to now, and then getting a 4th channel, it was just almost like must see TV for a lot of households. So what happened in season 8? Patrick Duffy, who played Bobby Ewing and was JR's brother, his contract came up or ran out, and so he was written out the show. So looking back on it, you think they could have done it differently, but he went out, they killed him off. So there was absolutely no doubt about it. I think he was run over. That's right, yeah. He was run over by a car in an attempt by his sister-in-law to run over his wife. God, that's just, that sentence alone just sums up Dallas. So killed in the show, but then I think the show, because of that, started to slip and was losing ground to Dynasty, which again, do you know Dynasty? Have you ever seen Dynasty?
Oh, yeah. I know of
That
it.
was the rival. That was like the
Yeah.
Coronation Street or
Yeah.
to EastEnders.
Ah,
But Dynasty was, I think, even more. It ramped up the glitz and glamour factor even more. Anyway, it started losing ground to it. So basically, the whole of 1986 season was a struggle. And so, what do? They think, right, we've got to bring Bobby back. He was such a popular character. So how do they do it? I think they said there was a lot of rumors in the media. Yeah, I've got it here. Tabloids, magazines, and newspapers were alight in the summer of '86 with hypotheses on how Bobby Ewing would be brought back. Everything from a zombie brother to which I think would have been brilliant, to an unheretofore twin were options. But the most realistic choice, and some might say lazy, was to provide the most simplistic narrative. It was all a dream. And that's exactly what happened. At the end of the season finale, Pam wakes up in her bed. She hears a shower running. She pulls the door open. She sees Bobby. He turns around and says good morning, just like that. Like the entirety of the 85-86 season didn't happen. And that's how it ended. And the cliffhanger allowed suspense to be carried through the summer as to who was really in the shower. But rest assured, it was the real Bobby, not a doppelganger, not a robot, not some bizarre creation. So the thing I even remember at the time, because it felt bizarre at the time, you've had a whole year of a show, and now you've written all those stories are out. And if I remember right, I think there were like new characters, etc., introduced. So just all some person's fever dream.
That's crazy.
I can appreciate how do you bring someone back, but at that point, surely you've just got to say, we can't, right? Surely someone says to whoever the writer is, like, Jim, really? If you haven't seen it, try look up the scene on YouTube.
You know, not to make you feel old, but even my dad to this day still references that Whenever something happens on TV that's very much a jump the shark moment, you'll always turn around and say something along the lines of, "Oh, look, it's Bobby Ewan coming out the shower." And it's like, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's just, it's weird to think that of all the scenes in television, we have the phrase jumping the shark and not walking out the shower.
Yeah, taking a shower. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so true, actually. Yeah, if I remember from what I said in the intro, I think Jumping the Shark just beat this by a year, didn't it? So maybe if things had been different. I just remember, because at the time I would have been something like 9 or 10, so fairly young still. Even then, at that point, at that age, I still remember thinking, really? Is this what they've done? It's just, it's just proper. It is, like they said, proper lazy. It's like, let's hope nobody cares about it. And like I said, I think it would have been fine if it hadn't been a whole season. Like if maybe he got killed halfway through the season and then they decided to bring it back. But like I said, you've had a whole year of or a season of stories which are ultimately no point to it. Anyway, Dallas, Bobby Ewing, if you don't know it, have a look at it. But yeah, and the fact that it's got the cheesiest scene when he turns around with a smile and says hello, almost like he knows it's a funny thing. That's what tops it off for me, I think.
It must be annoying, though, to think that you've invested so much time into a season and then all of a sudden they turn around to say, "Oh, by the way, it was all a dream." So all of those hours you sat down in front of the TV doesn't mean anything. And you're like, well, what?
I wish some shows could do that and wipe out some seasons or some shows. And I wish I could do that with football as well. It was all a dream.
Ah, true.
What's next?
So, linking back to what I was saying before, another one that might be quite a strange example is Doctor Who. And Doctor Who is one of those shows, don't get me wrong, it is fantastical, it's over the top, it's wild, it's, it's a show for like families and people of all ages, despite maybe some fans nowadays being very vocal and, let's face it, being a bit man-childish about it. But at the same time, you get a lot of moments. And don't get me wrong, Doctor Who's always, gone for the over-the-top kind of thing, but I feel as if there was a precedent that was set probably towards the end of David Tennant's run. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love David Tennant's run. I'm echoing what you're saying here to say that I don't think the show's necessarily bad, but they did this weird thing where they took the character of the Doctor and they gave him more and more of an influence. So, as far as I know, because obviously you and I both probably aren't old enough to have watched it when it first came out, in the 60s, of course, but at the same time, it started getting to the point where the Doctor became more and more important to the extent that they rewrote like the canon. I don't know if you saw this like on the news or on Twitter or anything for the last couple of seasons that they had on.
I kind of got into Doctor Who fairly late in the sense of, I think it was probably on the Matt Smith run when I then started watching it from the Christopher Eccleston from the start. But then I kind of zoned out. I think because I watched so much of it in one go, I kind of petered out when it was the Peter Capaldi. So I've lost the last couple of seasons of Doctor Who.
To be fair, I was the same. Like, I started because a friend introduced me in 2005 and I thought, oh, this is going to be rubbish. But fortunately, like, I really enjoyed myself. So I'm like, oh, this is great. Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant. By Matt Smith, I was kind of like yourself. I was petering out of it. I wasn't a big fan of his run. No offence to him, of course, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. And that's when they started making him like the centre of the universe.
Do you know what I think? Sorry, I was going to say, do you know what I think it was for me? It was when he started getting too much, there was a lot of focus on, was he a good person? Remember, he was like self-reflecting, am I a good person?
Yeah.
And I want to see a show about the Time Lord going from planet to planet, dealing with different aliens and having these adventures, not self-reflecting and navel-gazing and wondering, is he a good or bad person? So anyway, side story, but that was me, yeah.
No, but see, whenever I think of a character saying, am I a good person? Am I a good man? Do you know what it reminds me of? You know that sketch of, oh, I can't remember his name, David something, where he's dressed up as the German soldier during the Second World War, and he turns around to the other guy and he goes, are we the baddies?
I don't know that, but yeah, I can get that, yeah.
Oh, it's just every time I hear that phrase, I always think about that. Are we the baddies here? It's like we've got skulls on our heads and everything. And you know, it's like the Doctor who's like, he says, and I think it was the film of the 50th anniversary or something, like how he pressed the button and he destroyed the planet, and he says how he can hear the screams of children. It's like really dark stuff. And again, I just keep thinking back to are we the baddies? Because I feel as if we're the baddies, you know. But towards the end, like in the last couple of seasons, it was the Jodie Whittaker run, which personally, like, that wasn't my cup of tea, but I know a lot of people enjoyed it. And, you know, I don't want to take that away from anyone, but what I am going to take away from you is the twist about how they basically retconned the Doctor's past and they made her into like a super duper amazing mystery alien again. So she's not even like part of, you know, the secret society of time travelers and everything. She's she's like a alien that has regenerative powers and she got experimented on, and you know, then she becomes part of this other secret organization, and it just keeps going on and kind of building up like that. And to me personally, with all the Doctor Who has done, even with the Matt Smith era, even with Peter Capaldi, that was the moment I felt as if it just took the TARDIS, jumped over the giant space whale, and just kept going to the second star on the right, because it was. I know I'm getting my franchises mixed there, but yeah, it was a weird thing. Yeah.
You think that's because the one thing I do remember about it wasn't the Doctor supposed to only have like 11 regenerations or something? So is that a way of getting out of that? Is that the get out clause for that? Was it?
It was it was something like that. They said they had only, I think it was 12 or 13. I could be totally wrong in that, because they brought in John Hurt to mix up the regeneration cycle. So technically, you know, they bumped up the new ones a number. So like Matt Smith being 11 was 12.
Right.
David Tennant was technically 11. You know, like it was all kind of wibbly wobbly, as they say, but at the same time, I think it's just an episode where and you're going to think this is crazy, and anyone who hasn't seen Doctor Who's going to think this is crazy, but I'm pretty sure one of his assistants literally like knocks on a crack in the wall and says, "Hey, Time Lords, give him more regenerations," and they do, and that's it. That's literally
so they could have just asked all along.
Yeah, apparently the Time Lords could give them, which is weird, because considering the retcon that the Doctor actually had more regenerations than I'm all for, you know, trying new things with characters and reinventing certain aspects, but retconning the character to such a degree, that is definitely, to me anyway, it feels like a jump in the shark boat, or as we established before, walking out the shower moment there.
Yeah, actually, that's what we've got to call it. Maybe I should call the episode that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the show hasn't been on consecutively for 60 years, but it feels weird that something that has been around for 60 years gets such a wild rewrite like that then. When there's probably not even any hint about it, potentially, or they probably retconned that in as well, I guess.
Probably.
Okay, I am going to do a complete sort of about turn and go into the world of sitcoms. Now, I've got a couple actually sitcoms. I won't have much on this, and maybe it's just me because I was a huge fan of the show as well. Were you ever a fan of Frasier?
I've seen a couple of episodes, and I have to say it is hilarious, but I never really watched it growing up, which you know, that's full on me, I have to say.
I loved Frasier. I loved Cheers. I thought it was a great spin-off. It was one of the few spin-offs that genuinely worked. If you've seen a bit of it, so you know the setup. You've got Frasier lives in Seattle. His dad moves in with him. He's got brother Niles. They get the housekeeper from Manchester, who's quite a dizzy Mancunian. And the whole story of it is that Frasier's brother Niles really fancies Daphne, and he's pining for her season after season. Now, for me, the jump the shark moment or the walking in the shower moment for me is they then I think it was fairly late on, so I think it had 10 or 11 seasons. So I think it was season 7 they got together. Niles and Daphne eventually got together, and for me, that's then when the show went downhill for me, because you took out one of the key components that made the show quite funny, is him pining over her and them not quite ever getting together. And to be honest, to me, even though it lasted 7 seasons, it didn't feel like it was a worn out plot point. But as soon as they got married, because all of a sudden she became a lot more refined and sophisticated, and they were laughing at Roz and Frasier, and it just felt, one, it felt weird that they did end up together, and two, it's like they totally changed the dynamic of both characters, that it made the rest of the show just not feel right to me. So I still saying, as I said earlier, I still had some good moments for the remaining seasons, but that's when it lost its shine for me. And it's like, yeah, let's just get these two together because that that's what we think people want. And no, I think it totally changed the way the show felt.
That is quite interesting, though, because there is a lot of sitcoms that really depend on the will they, won't they trope.
Yeah.
Like, I think Friends is probably one of the big ones with Ross and Rachel, and they do get together, but then they split them up, and it's a kind of double-edged sword, isn't it? Because on the one hand, if they do get together, then the whole will they, won't they dynamic gets completely scrubbed off the table. But if they don't have them together and they take too long to get them together, then you're kind of like, well, why am I watching?
Yeah.
It's like this is going on far too long.
Yeah, you bring up a good example in Friends, though. But what Friends did well is, like you said, they got them to be together a couple of times, but then split them up fairly quickly. And that then becomes a comedy point in itself, as much as breakups can be. And whilst they did end up together, it was pretty much right at the end of the final series, right? So, yeah, maybe if Niles and Daphne had got together right at the end of Frasier, it would have been different. And if you're changing the way characters are just by putting them together, then that feels a shame of the previous 7 seasons as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, what's next?
So I went a bit more international in my hunt for
Okay.
another show, because I can't remember if I told you, and for anyone listening who doesn't know, I'm very much into language learning and things like that, which I have to say does lead me into a weird realm in the world of Netflix. So, like, I'll be looking for like Chinese speaking shows, I'll be looking for Spanish shows, I'll be looking for this and that. I'm not saying it's improved my language skills by any means, but one of the shows that I became absolutely addicted to was one called Money Heist. Have you ever heard of this one?
Heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Well, again, this is one that I would recommend the first 2 seasons. Basically, it was a show that I think was on Spanish TV like the first 2 seasons, and then it got picked up by Netflix, and this is where the jumping the shark or walking out the bank, as it were, moment came into time. So the show's basically about this guy who, and don't get me wrong, it has its kind of implausible moments, like, oh, how did he plan ahead? You know, it's one of these ones where the heist goes wrong. It's like meticulously planned, and then it goes wrong. So they're trapped inside the. It's not really a bank. It's like the place where they print off like the euros and everything. So they're basically printing off the money so they can escape, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's still entertaining because you're on the edge of your seat thinking, oh, are they going to get out? Are they not going to get out? What's going to happen? So, spoilers, but for the most part, they do succeed for the first 2 seasons, despite, the stereotypical losses in the team and everything. But otherwise, fantastic TV, would wholeheartedly recommend. And then because it was so popular, they brought it back for 3 more seasons, would you believe? And it was terrible.
Really?
Well, not terrible. It wasn't terrible. Okay, I'll dial it back a wee bit, but it just wasn't good. It's because they decide then, they decide because one of their crewmates ends up stupidly, it's his own fault, but he ends up getting arrested by Interpol.
Right.
So they want to try and free him.
Yeah.
So the way they do that is they try to rob the National Bank of Spain, which is pretty much, as far as I know, is where they keep all the gold and things of Spain. So it just gets ridiculous. You've got a one-man army team going in trying to shoot people. You've got the first 2 seasons were a little bit implausible, but these ones are just way, way over the top. It's it goes from realism into fantasy at times. And what's annoying as well is there's a particular character that I won't spoil it, but a particular character that dies in season 1 and 2, but they bring them back through flashbacks.
Oh, okay.
Because he was so popular. Yeah. And it's gotten to the point where he's actually got his own spin-off coming. And it's crazy. And that's what I was saying at the very beginning. It's despite the fact that some people think that Money Heist has outstayed its welcome, you've still got spin-off series about a character who is, by all means, in the show, long, long dead.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that hasn't affected him because, well, why would it? The money of Netflix. And even if you look at I think there was another reboot, or not a reboot, but there was a quote-unquote reimagining of it for a Korean version.
Okay.
So
okay.
you can tell that the seasons 3 to 5, while not strong and while walking out the shower or walking into the shower, you can tell that hasn't hurt the series or hurt its reputation. So it's quite interesting to see that unlike shows like Sherlock or even Dallas, I know they technically tried to bring back Dallas. I think they brought it back in Channel 5
I think they did,
for a
you're right.
season or 2.
Fairly recently,
Yeah, and then I think it just disappeared again. Neighbours just quietly retired.
That is a really interesting one, because I've got something I'll mention right at the end about some place where a character dies and they bring it back. That seems to be a familiar thing, and it just smacks of laziness, because it does take away any impact the death of that character has, right? It's like the classic thing, even in the superhero films now, there's no peril anymore, because they're not going to kill that superhero. So in certain franchises and certain shows now, you can never feel tense because nothing bad's going to happen to them, especially you just think, oh well, in that show you mentioned, if another character dies, well, how do you know they're not going to bring him back sort of as a fairly regular character next week or next season?
Because they even did that in, going back to my first example, they even did that in Sherlock, where Moriarty gets killed.
That's right. Yeah.
I always remember the fan theories where they were like, "Oh no, the way he shot himself, he didn't actually shoot him, or it was a blank, or some rubbish." Yeah, it reminds me of when I used to play games like Call of Duty, and there would be a particular character that would get shot in the head or something, and because people liked them so much, they would say, "Oh no, he didn't actually get killed," and everything, and you're like, "Oh no, such denial." But you're completely right though, with the MCU or any really most franchises that even if it's grounded in realism, you don't have to worry about necessarily bringing them back.
Yeah.
It's like you can bring them back in a flashback or, you know, I mean, technically it's not the same actor, but it kind of reminds me of a film that I watched recently, The Godfather 2,
Okay.
which I know I'm late to the game, but you know how, and again, spoilers, they killed off Marlon Brando's character in the first
Yeah.
one, yet somehow they dedicated half the second film to his like past life. And I know it's obviously it's not the same actor, but it's still that character. So even though he is long dead in the plot itself, yeah, they're still like giving him time. So yeah, it's weird that there is like a bit of a trend with a lot of these shows.
I really
Of
like
like,
The Godfather too, so we're going to move on now. So,
yeah, absolutely.
no, I get what you mean. No, I get what you mean. I'm going to do a couple quickly. This one I should have actually lumped in with my previous one. We were talking about it. I'm going to say Friends, but what I'm going to say specifically about Friends was when Joey and Rachel dated.
Oh, Jesus,
That
yeah.
really did feel like they've run out of ideas. It's almost like they've got the matrix of which characters have dated which ones, and realised sort of towards the end, oh, we haven't had Joey and Rachel date, and it just felt so again unnecessary. It was an awkward storyline even to watch. It gave nothing, and it was the fact it was over so quickly. Even though they managed to make it kind of stretch over a couple of seasons, it wasn't needed. We didn't get anything out of it.
Yeah.
Just erase it.
I think even the actors were uncomfortable with that. But again,
Looked
because
it.
the writers had the power,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the one I wanted to mention kind of bucks the trend of what we have been saying a little bit, but it was Roseanne. So did you ever watch Roseanne? I know it came back and then there was all sorts of controversy with it, but the original run of Roseanne,
Course,
did you ever see that?
No, but again, it's one of those ones that I know of, but
Yeah.
unfortunately not.
So again, need to say it was huge in America and over here. So I think it was number one show in America in the first 5 years. But what I've got here is it jumped over the shark in its final season. So they're always like a poor working class family. And that was the whole kind of thing about it, that the comedy sometimes was around their struggles and how they were. The Connors won the state lottery and suddenly became worth over $100 million. Right? Fine so far.
Mhm.
However, it was later revealed that the whole series itself was a story written by Roseanne Connor about her life, and Dan, the husband, had actually died at the end of season 8. And so, that, as I said, it took a dark and unnecessary turn for the worse. Now, if this was a thriller or this was a drama, brilliant twist ending. But it's a comedy, and this is another bugbear of mine, comedy series that start going serious. I watch a comedy because I want to laugh. The clue's in the name. They gave fans what they wanted, almost like, oh, this family have done it. They've come out of their struggles. No, it was all a story, and your most favourite character died 2 seasons ago. Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is, you can have comedies that are serious, but at the same time have that levity behind it. I mean, if you look at Blackadder Goes Forth, for example, that's set against, one of the worst moments in human history, with the First World War being the setting. But at the same time, it's something that you kind of expect going into it.
Yeah.
They're poking fun at things, and when they do have a serious moment, you're ready for it. But when you just told me there that you had a family sitcom followed by, the finale saying, oh, by the way, the dad was dead the entire time, a la Sixth Sense style, you're like, that isn't right.
That's it. It's the opposite of the walking in the shower that we've been talking about. It's because and remember, so it was what's his name? It's John Goodman, right? So he was a really popular character, larger than life, and I think probably most people were watching it for him as well. And then you're kind of doing that. It was devastating. And again, I remember at the time, I think I'd stopped watching it for a couple of seasons, but obviously it was big news at the time. And again, I thought, yeah, I'm glad I hadn't carried on watching that. So,
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Right, what else have you got? Actually, how many more have you got?
Only one or two, really. I can race
No,
through
no,
them
it's all right. No, go
if
for
you
it. No,
want.
go
Yeah.
for it. Give us your next
Yeah.
one.
Well, kind of it's just a big conglomerate, I suppose, of shows. Reality TV is quite a bad one, and by extension, soap operas as well here. And I mean in the sense of the UK one, so you know, your EastEnders, your Coronation Streets, your Emmerdales and things, and honestly, like that could be an episode in itself
Yeah.
talking about how they go off the deep end, you know, because
Wow.
you've
Yes.
got good, yeah, because I mean, you've got, and for any British listeners of a certain age, you'll know the very famous "You're Not My Mum, Yes I Am" twist. That's an example of a good one. But then when you get ones where it's like someone getting, I don't know, getting killed, or and again they come back, or they are their long lost brother or sister
Yeah.
or something,
Yeah.
or they survive a beating or something. But in terms of reality TV, it's maybe a bit harder to define in terms of when it jumps the shark, but I feel as if for shows like maybe X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, even the Bake Off is very guilty of this as well, where they try to mix things up, no pun intended, sorry, when they try to mix things up and they try to do something new with the
Yeah.
show. You know, they'll say, oh, we're doing a new challenge, oh, we're doing this and that. And it just feels almost as if they are, again, they're jumping the shark, but not in the traditional sense of, oh, they're doing something wacky that's going to kill the show, but it ends up ultimately leading to that because, I mean, when was the last time X Factor was on when they tried to change things up?
So, do you know, I gave up on that show after the
Oh,
first couple of seasons. But no, you raise a really good point, Soren. I just want to do a public service announcement here. Stop ruining Bake Off, please. I love that show. And like you said, yeah, I think they learned in the last series, I think they tried to do a bit too much, didn't they?
oh, absolutely. I mean, I've talked to Sean from Review It Yourself, and my God, it is. We've talked about this in length about how they just decide randomly, at least for the last season, they decided randomly to be like, oh, we're going to do like time limited ones where some people will get a certain amount of time, some people will get less time, others it was like, oh, you just have to bake this one. Oh, can they give you instructions and things? And I completely agree with you.
Or
Stop
tasks
ruining the
without
bake off.
bacon in. You know?
Oh, they were all about
Yeah.
cooking, weren't they?
Oh, God, you've
Yeah.
really got me wound
Oh,
up here now. I'm sorry. But it's like
oh,
the Bake Off show isn't a gripping drama. It's not a thriller. It's not a sci-fi. It's a comfort show. It does what it says on the tin. It's a great British baking show. Just show me those contestants baking in the 3 rounds. Don't mix it up. Don't change it. That's what viewers have tuned in for. Sorry, that's it. Rant over. Yeah.
yeah. No, because I mean, to to get an example across the pond, there's two particular shows that I really got into Netflix. I don't know if you've seen these. One's called Nail It, and the other's called Is It Cake?
Seen the Is It Cake
Have you
one,
seen?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, for Is It Cake, they brought it back for a second sequel. Or sorry, they brought it back for a second season. And all I'll say is I don't agree with who won. That's all I'll say for the controversial view. But they were allowing them to do things like mess up the other props to make them look
Oh,
more
okay. Yeah.
cakey rather than, you know, making their own cakes look more realistic, which I thought, and you know, typical Scot here, I'm like, hold on, that's no fair. That's not fair at all. But whereas when you go into something like Nailed It is basically people who can't bake. You know, they can
Okay, yeah.
make a basic cake, but they can't make it look as good as what they've been shown. But you expect that, and it is very much a comfort show. And you're right, sometimes you get that in the Bake Off. It's a very comforting show. It's one you just kind of sit back and relax, and you think that's the, you expect what you're going in for, but when you go into the last season, it's like, oh, you're going to be cooking fajitas, or
Well,
oh,
that's
you're going to
it.
be doing this,
The
or
enjoyment is the
and it's like,
baking element, and seeing each week. You could have the same
yeah,
show, the same task each week. Different bakers are going to have different results, and and that's the enjoyment of it. We don't need to see them put through some sort of game show style Squid Game rule set.
yeah. But I mean, do you remember, was it Cake Gate or something like that? Or Bingate? No, sorry,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
Bingate. Yeah, where someone, not accidentally, but someone took the cake out of the
Yes, yeah.
fridge. And because of that, he dumped it in the bin and everything, and because he was
Which I
rightfully
would have done.
upset. And people,
Yeah.
yeah, and people were actively calling for that woman to be arrested, which I thought was hilarious. But if you think about it, that whole moment stemmed from a woman taking out the cake of a fellow contestant from the freezer. There was no like wacky rule set, there was no complication. It was just make an ice cream cake, and if it's not up to scratch, then you're going to be out the competition. But when you think about the recent one, and you think of them being very picky, saying, "Oh, I don't like this," or "Oh, I don't," because that's something that does annoy me, and I feel as if maybe nowadays it's a bit better in reality shows. And apologies, this is a whole other trope, but it's the fact that when a show, or in particular, reality shows kind of going downhill, the judges will maybe be a wee bit harsher on the
Yeah.
contestants. And you kind of think, like, especially Paul Hollywood, you're just like, it's a baking show. Come on.
This is exactly
And
it.
don't get me wrong, I was just going to say, it's not like they're making afternoon tea for the king or anything, or that they're going to get, like The Apprentice, they're going to get £100,000 or something for their cake. They're still going to get a rightful
This is it.
reward for it, but
This show isn't going to win BAFTAs and things like that. It does exactly what it says. It is a really nice. The funny thing was, I didn't even watch. It is one of my favorite comfort shows. I didn't watch the first season. I remember my wife was watching it. I didn't, because I thought, oh, this baking show is not for me. Then I think I started watching the second season, and that's it. Then I was hooked. And because there is something relaxing, I love food. I absolutely love food. So there's a bonus. But yeah, what I liked about it is it was just that. It was those same 3 rounds every week in the sense of the format of the round. You got to see people bake. There was some, you get the X Factor style tragedies, in the sense of tragic baking. And then you got some really superstar kind of baking. And that's all it is. And yeah, sorry, I could go on and on about the Bake Off, but all I'll say is please don't ruin it.
yeah,
What I thought you were going to
agreed.
say actually about, you mentioned a couple of Netflix ones, and this probably shows the first one how geeky I am as well. There was one about glass blowing. Have you seen that?
I have, yeah.
I loved the first season. Stopped watching the second one because I think they tried to tinker around with it too much again. And it's like, keep it the same. And there's a Texas barbecue one, kind of like the Bake Off, but Texan barbecuing. And again, the first season felt far better than the second one, maybe because they tried to change it. But I don't know. But I agree with you. You don't need to always tinker with a winning formula or recipe.
Because when they do that, though, it just changes what the show was, and that is almost the literal definition of jumping the shark. Because it's a particular moment that they've taken, and then they've done something completely ridiculous. And now, when you're going forward, it's like the Bake Off. When you're going forward, you're not going to think about the good times of watching the Bake Off and thinking, oh, Mary Berry, Paul Hollywood, blah, blah, blah. You're going to be thinking, Jesus, is there no cake in Mexico that they could have chosen rather than making bloody fajitas and things like that? You're like, are you serious?
Yeah. Oh dear.
But
Right,
yeah.
I can't believe out of everything we've done, we've spent most time at the moment on the Bake Off, but that's just how much I damn care about it. All right.
It's a national
It
treasure,
is. Yeah,
to be fair.
stop ruining it. I've got again another quick final TV one. This is my final TV one. I've got then very quick honourable mentions for films, but this one I actually looked up and I've included it because I just think it's hilarious. So it's Scooby Doo.
Oh, okay.
It's basically a number of websites accused it of jumping the shark when they introduced Scrappy Doo. Because they
Oh,
said,
of
yeah,
course.
although he
Yeah.
was designed to help avoid cancellation, his introduction in 1979 with catchphrases like Scrappy Dabby Doo, Let Me At, and Puppy Power made him one of the least liked cartoon characters of all time. And a lot of people then say that was basically the end of that show. So I remember watching it and I'm going to say I quite like Scrappy Doo, but don't hate me.
I have to admit, I did laugh at I think it was the early 2000s film, like the live action one, where, and again, spoilers in case anybody's worried about spoilers for the Scooby Doo film, but yeah, they brought him back as like an antagonist, like
Oh,
as a
right.
twist villain.
Okay.
Then I have to say it was actually really funny the way they did it. But that's like the right way. But like on that note of Scooby Doo, did they not do the same for the Flintstones as well? Only instead of Scrappy Doo, it was like with an alien or something.
I don't remember that. I remember they gave both families kids, didn't they? Was it
Oh
Pebbles and
yeah,
Bam Bam? I think so. I
yeah.
don't know if it was that, but I wouldn't. I don't recall the alien bit. It sounds like the kind of thing they would do.
It was the grey something or other. It had like a helmet, and it was just like a tiny green guy that supposedly only Fred and Barney could see. But the thing is, they say that they didn't really get much of a conclusion or like closure for that character because it was supposed to be an alien that was banished to the prehistoric age. But it seems like the weirdest thing because at least with Scooby Doo you can understand that,
Yeah,
a younger version of Scooby who's like braver compared to him. He's
yeah,
his complete opposite. Yeah, that makes sense. Aliens and cavemen, that just sounds like some
yeah,
weird form you stumble across on the internet and go, what the hell? It's like,
yeah.
yeah, no, just, yeah, it's a weird. Because I know The Simpsons do make fun of that as well. Not that particular thing, but the idea of introducing new characters to keep a show
Yeah,
fresh.
yeah. Okay, what have you got?
Okay, the last one I've got is probably quite a famous example. That, of course, being Game of Thrones. Um,
Okay.
I don't know. Oh, I don't know. Did you watch Game of Thrones when it was at its height?
Yeah, and I'm laughing because it hasn't aired yet at time of recording, but I did a show, I've seen mentioned at the start about TV finales, and Game of Thrones featured in that as well. So
Oh,
it's featured in the bad TV finales and also Jump the Shark, which says a lot about a show which for a number of seasons was actually one of the best things on TV, I think. But
the thing is, it used to be so
yeah,
good, and this is why I kind of struggle with thinking about fantasy or sci-fi examples for jumping the shark because inherently it is fantasy. It's supposed to jump the shark. It's supposed
yeah,
to have all these fantastical elements. But when you've got a show that is fantasy and then it jumps the
yeah,
shark,
it's doing
you know
well.
you're doing something. Yeah, you're doing something really, really weird. Like for example, I can't remember the showrunners' names. I think it was D&D was their
Yeah,
nickname,
yeah,
and they wanted just to finish the entire eighth season just as quickly as possible. So they had really stupid moments like, oh, Daenerys just forgot about the Iron Fleet.
yeah,
What she did spot a whole bunch of ships like up top that they somehow managed to take down a dragon with, and oh yeah, let's put again spoilers. Let's put Bran on the throne
yeah.
because what? Why? Why? Oh yeah, let's kill off the White Walkers in one episode where we can't even see anything. I watched that in a dark room, by the way.
Yes,
I
yes,
still couldn't make out anything.
yeah.
I was like, what is going on? There's just so many moments. Like, don't get me wrong, there are moments throughout the series where you think, oh, okay, that's a bit much, or okay, that's a bit too far, but at least it was still grounded in the world. Whereas in this, it's just, yeah, the whole 8th season as Jumping the Shark. It's Jumping the Dragon, as it were.
No, it really is. And that's kind of what we say in the episode about TV finales, is that it just felt like the writers, everyone connected with the show had enough and just wanted to write an ending quickly. And that's kind of what it felt like, isn't it?
And it's a shame because it was one of these shows that just had such an impact on pop culture.
Yeah.
You know, people were, for goodness sake, they were naming their children Khaleesi at one point, which I wouldn't say, like, I'm a fan of the show. I wouldn't say I'm that much of a fan of the show that I would call my child or my dog or anything Khaleesi, but yeah, it was definitely a touchstone at the time. Like, everybody knew what Game of Thrones was. They knew even the bare basic references. So to have a show that, I mean, again, that's another example though, because despite the horrific ending and the fact that the reputation will never recover from that, they still did the spin-off. Was it House of Dragons?
I've not watched it though. I've not watched it.
I haven't.
It's one of those things. I know it's got good reviews, but I kind of feel like I'm done with it. That final season just did me.
Because that is quite an interesting thing though. It's like, even though you've suffered through like the good, the bad, and the downright ugly of a show, if they come out with more of that content, you're kind of like, well, what's the point? You know, like, there's a particular, one slight side tangent show I watched. It was an anime called The Great Pretender. I don't know if you've ever seen this.
No, I haven't.
Long story short, it's like about a group of con men, and this guy gets kind of inducted into their group and everything, and each season they focus on conning particular people. By the last season, for anyone who's seen The Great Pretender, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but it is balls to the wall crazy, and not in a good way. It's like, so much so that they build an identical tower, pretend that someone else or a couple of other characters get killed off and everything. It's all these events that they seem very final, but then of course they're not final because they just bring them back because that's what the writers can do. Which I have to admit is something that they don't necessarily do in Game of Thrones, but I mean, the damage is done, dead or not. You know, they might not be dead, but their careers are... No, I'm only joking.
What I say about Game of Thrones is it's very similar, although completely different scale, but similar to Sherlock, that the disappointment is even greater to fans because of how good what came before it was.
Absolutely.
I think that's what it is. Very good final one there. I'm going to just do a couple of quick honourable mentions, and I've broken my rule of the duration of an episode, but we needed to speak all this, and I think our rant about Bake Off needs to be heard. We should have done that at the start. That needs to be an announcement for more people to hear. But I've just got a couple of films I want to throw your way as an honourable mention. One, I've got Fast and Furious, and in brackets, I've got Take Your Pick. No, right. I have to say, I love the Fast and Furious films. Again, I got into them late. I literally only watched them this year. They're dumb fun, right? But a car in space, come on, you know.
I mean, I have to say, like, I mean, you say you got into them late. I still haven't watched, as of this episode, I still haven't watched the Fast and Furious films.
Do it.
Not yet, but I know what well, not what happens, but in the sense that it just gets more and more ridiculous as it goes on. I've even got a friend who says that, I think it's Hobbs and Shaw. Is that a spin-off of it? Yeah. He swears that it is a fantastic film. He's like, watch it. It's one of the best action films you will ever watch. And I'm like, that is amazing.
I love it. I'm being honest. I love them. It's like the Expendables of this kind of like the car scene, if you know what I mean. But if you go into it knowing that the first one is kind of grounded in a bit of street racing, and the Tokyo Drift is supposedly also grounded in the street racing. Once you accept that, after that, it's going into the weird, not weird, but the over-the-top action film. It's fine. But there are a couple of sequences, and the one I mentioned about a car being used to go into space, that thread is really being pulled quite thin there. So yeah, Fast and Furious, take your pick. And for me, again, one that really hit me just actually today, funnily enough, was Jaws 4.
Oh, yeah.
So have you seen all the Jaws films?
I know what happens in most of them because I've seen a couple of reviews of people talking about how it went from a shark film to downright crazy, like man-hunting shark. And I think, is that the one with Michael Caine in it?
It is. And I remember seeing this at the cinema as well. And absolutely, it's gone from quite a terrifying, tense film that made you not want to go anywhere near the water to, yeah, in this fourth one, the shark has got a grudge and is actually hunting them. If I remember right, I think it follows the family fly to the Bahamas or something, and the shark follows them. And it's actually going after the family. And it's like, yeah, you put it into the realm of like that schlocky, like Nightmare on Elm Street kind of spoof horror almost.
Yeah.
So yeah, so again, literally shark, jumping the shark there. And I think it was a shame it was the last film, but yeah, it was just bizarreness. So yeah, well look, thank you for that. I think we've had a bit of fun with a lot of those, right?
Absolutely. Totally.
And like I said, before anyone does get the wrong instinct, we're not saying these are bad. It's just picking moments out of potentially good shows or ideas that do kind of leave you scratching your head, right? So, but if there's something we haven't said, let us know. Drop us a tweet or an email. Let us know your thoughts on it if there's any obvious ones we've missed. Satsu, thank you again for giving me your time. Do you just want to shout out what your socials are, how people can get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to check out more of my content in particular, you can check us out at our website, podpage.com/Chatsunami, where we also do have a contact page. So if you want to reach out to us directly, please feel free to use that. And yeah, can't wait to speak to you. We are also on most platforms. We're on Twitter under the name Chatsunami Pod. We're on Instagram under the name Chatsunami. We're on Facebook. We're on Threads. We're on TikTok. Can you tell that I'm a little annoyed that we're on everything now because of
Threads is the new one I've got to get used to saying, yeah.
Oh, Threads as well. My goodness. So many, but if you want to catch us there, then please feel free to check us out there. But yeah, as always, thank you though for having me on. It's always a blast coming in, casting views.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Just a real side note, Threads name always reminds me, there's that doomsday film, British film called Threads, isn't there, about nuclear fallout, which apparently, I've not watched it, but is one of the most depressing and distressing films, apparently. And every time I hear Threads, I just think of that.
Do you know, funny enough, you're not the first person that I've heard say that. And every time now I think of it when I hear Threads, I'm like, oh, great.
So you should do an episode on it. You should do an episode on it.
I'll need to watch it first, and then I'll need to convince that goes.
So, sorry, diversion. Please do follow, subscribe to Chatsunami if you're not. It really is an enjoyable podcast. If this is the first time you're hearing this podcast, please consider pressing the subscribe button and leaving a rating or review where you can. You can get hold of me at castingviewspod@gmail.com. And as Satsu said, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, TikTok under Casting Views. So, yeah, feel free to drop me a note on there. So that's all for this week, and we will catch you next time.
1, 2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, take what we've got, 'cause you need it. Don't make us get a sport.